Hello everyone. In this video, I want to read this essay, actually my own essay about the Israel and Palestine conflict. You can find my essay in this channel, Human and Religion, and this PDF. If you download this PDF, you can actually find this article, this essay. But now I'm going to read it myself. The original owner of the disputed land of Israel and Palestine based on the Jewish Bible. Problem design. In this article, two questions are answered. First of all, is the Jewish territorial problem related to the present era and the events of the 19th century, or does it go back to the past and the time of the Old Testament? Second question, if the problem is historical, what is its roots? Examining the first question, is the current war in the land of Canaan a problem related to the present age and the last century, or it is rooted in the past events and the content of the Old Testament? In this article, with the aim of maintaining neutrality, the name of Canaan is used instead of Israel or Palestine. Some believe that referring to the past does not work to determine the main inhabitant of Canaan, because in the past this land had different inhabitants. Any period that is considered as the original as the origin of the inhabitants of this land, another one ruled before it. So it is not possible to reach a comprehensive answer in determining the main inhabitant of this land. Now the question is whether it is possible to consider a specific time origin for the inhabitants of this land, or to determine the main inhabitant of this land. Some others believe that this claim will be discussed in the rest of the article. The Jews are now secular people, and referring to the Bible and materials that have historical and religious aspects are not are of little importance to them, and the root of the problems is in the present and in the present age and events. They see afterwards they see after world wars and modern times. The question that is raised regarding this approach is whether the current policies of the Jews are unrelated to the past of their people and the content of the Old Testament. In the following, the evidence of the connection between Israel's politics and the content of the Old Testament will be examined. Answer to the first question. At the beginning, a summary of the content of the Old Testament is given, and then a reference is made to the action of Theodor Herzl, the founder of the Jewish state, regarding the efforts of the Jews to recognize this nation. A summary of the Old Testament. The first book of the Old Testament, after the story of creation and the story of Noah, actually deals with the story of Jacob and the Israelites and the migration to Egypt during the time of Joseph. The second book describes the plight of the children of Israel who were slaves in Egypt when Moses came and took them out of Egypt and moved to the promised land of Canaan. The fourth book contains the events that happened to the people of Israel in the desert between the way of Egypt and the promised land. The children of Israel were not allowed to enter Canaan due to their lack of faith and wandered in the desert for 40 years. In the fifth book, The children of Israel reached the Jordan River after 40 years of wandering. In the last part of this book, Moses chose his successor, Joshua, to lead the people of Israel to Canaan. The next book is Joshua, which talks about the conquest of Canaan by Israel. Joshua divided Canaan among the tribes of Israel. The next book, Judges, deals with the internal disputes of the Israeli tribes living in Canaan, which are sometimes attacked by Palestinians. The first book of Samuel, is about David's rule, while Israel was at war with the Philistines. In the first book of Chronicles, the people of the land of Judah, uh, who were captured by the Babylonians and exiled to Babylon, returned to their homeland by order of Cyrus. The second book of the Chronicles of the Days is related to Solomon's rule, which because the rulers of that time were not God-fearing. This book ends with the fall of Judah and the exile of the Jews to Babylon again. The next book, Ezra, deals with the return of exiled Jews to Jerusalem. When Ezra was informed that a group of Jewish women had married non-Jews and they would eventually seek to correct this. The book of Esther tells the story of Haman, the Persian commander, who decided to massacre the Jews. But this act was not realized when a Jewish girl um, named Esther infiltrated the court of King Hashayar. Jews celebrate not being massacred every year. In the book of Psalms, the Jews are satisfied with their king and rejoice. Yesaya is a book that has more quotations from it in the New Testament than the sum total of quotations from other books of the Old Testament in the New Testament. Yesaya paid more attention to the coming of the promised Messiah or Mashiach than any other prophet. The story of this book includes the history of children of Israel and some of their sins, which led to their trial. And at the end, they were given promises for example, the mountain on which God's house is located, Zion, will be considered the highest peak in the world. The wars of the nations will end, and the goats will graze beside the lion, and the infant will play safely among the snakes. In that day, the rising king will be the standard of salvation for all the nations. They will unite and attack the Palestinians. God has dried up the Gulf of Egypt and will raise his hand over the Euphrates River so that the survivors of his people will return to their land. In this book, Israel was punished and exiled many times, and finally he gave them apocalyptic promises, such as the fulfillment of the promise of the Nile to the Euphrates. Became the book of Jeremiah is also dedicated to the punishment of the people of Judah, but in it, the hopeful future of Jerusalem is announced. At the end of this book, Jerusalem is destroyed and the people are exiled to Babylon. In the Marathi book of Jeremiah, which was written by Jeremiah after the destruction of Jerusalem, he talks about the plight of the remnants in Jerusalem and, of course, about his promising future. Prophet Ezekiel, who himself was one of the exiles to Babylon, promises to return to Jerusalem and rebuild it. Daniel was also one of the exiles to Babylon who made his way to the court of Babylon due to the power of interpreting dreams. And finally promises the emergence of a king and the formation of a world government. In the book of Joshua, Israel is interpreted as the bride of God's betrayal. The summary is the calamities that before Israel and are considered to be due to disloyalty um, to God's commands. In the book of Joel, the locust attack is considered as a symbol of the enemy's attack on Judah. And further, God, I will pour out my spirit on all people, sons and daughters will prophesy. In the book of Amos, Israel enjoyed prosperity, but they angered God with their actions. Amos is a prophet. God will roar from Mount Zion, and the pastures will dry up. Damascus will be occupied, and the people will go into captivity. The people of Gaza, because they had already ranked Israel, will be taken into captivity and their fences will be set on fire. The people of Ashdod and Ashkelon and their remaining Palestinian will perish. In the book of Obadiah, Israel is interpreted as God's people and its enemies, such as Edom and Palestine, are promised destruction. My holy mountain in Jerusalem will be a place of salvation, and Israel will regain its land. The book of Micah was written before the fall of Israel in 700 BC, but it tells of a future in which blessing will come to Israel. In the book of Zephaniah, the punishment of Israel mm, was first predicted, and at the end, the promise of glory and power was given to the Israelites. The in the book of Zechariah, the promise of the coming of the promised Messiah has been discussed many times, which was fulfilled after 500 years with the coming of Jesus. In the book of Malachi, which is the last book of the Old Testament, the promise of the coming of Christ is given. The Son of Justice will rise with a healing ray, and you will be happy and light winged like cows and that go to the pasture. The continuation of the history of Jewish people during the time of Christianity and Islam until the present day is brief. The Jews did not accept Jesus one as the promised one, and Jesus was sacrificed with crucified with the support of some Jews. The Jews were forced to flee due to their opposition to the Romans, and the years of exile began for them again. During the time of Islam, Omar, the second caliph, defeated the Romans and conquered the land of Canaan. Jews from different parts of the world were allowed to return to this land. Around the 15th century, the Jews decided to form a state, and this decision was formalized in 1897 by Theodor Herzl. Later, with the start of the World War, the immigration of Jews to this land increased, and contemporary history of this land was established. Now the question is whether it is possible to determine the origin and beginning to determine the inhabitants of the land of Canaan. The answer of the Jews to this question is that this land is their historical land, and due to their past, they were exiled from this land and became refugees in other parts of the world. Some of them deeply believe that um, even Abraham lived in the land of Israel. Of course, this issue is one of the contradictions in their beliefs, because Israel or Jacob was a descendant of Abraham and actually his grandson. Of course, they have also shown thorough genetic testing that they belong to the same region, and in this sense, um, they do not have a real counterclaim. Palestinians also believe that they have always lived in this land, and they also have no problem determining their past with genetic tests, and based on this claim, they also belong to this land. Of course, Palestinians became Arab after Islam, but their genetic origin is in this region. Returns. The historical origin for the inhabitants of this land can be recognized from the second book of the Old Testament, Exodus. According to this book, Jacob, Israel, Joseph, and his brothers migrated from the land of Canaan to Egypt, and then during the time of Moses, due to the pressure of the Egyptians and their slavery in that land, they decided to return to Canaan. The continuation of the history of these people is discussed in the summary mentioned in this article. Before the migration of Israel and its children to Egypt, this family was living there like any other families that lives in any country. But later, during the time of Moses and after they returned to Canaan, they entered into a war with the residents there. Their former homeland, they settled there, formed a government, and were exiled to Babylon twice. After Christ, he went to war with the Romans. Actually, they went to war with the Romans and left that land for the third time and became a refugee in other countries. For the Jews, they have been always from this land to such an extent that returning to it has become an apocalyptic wish for them. And as they believe that the Messiah will come and return them to the land of Canaan. Now, the answer to the first question: is the Jewish territorial issue related to the present era and the events of the 19th century, or does it go back to the past and to the time of the Old Testament? Considering that this article is based on the Jewish Bible, Old Testament, it is one of the most widely circulated books in the human history. Uh, by referring to this book, one can clearly see the historical roots of this dispute, which of course will be presented in the rest of the article for more evidence. Found out voices such as the promise of the Nile to Euphrates, the return to Jerusalem, and the events of Gaza, Syria, and most importantly, the promise of the coming of the Messiah. Are things that are mentioned in the holy books and are heard even now. So the mere secularity of the Jews violates the impact of their history on their current situation. It is not, and that the solution should be sought by referring to their to these books. Examining the second question. To examine the second question, that is what happened in the past of this nation that led to such a war. We will again study parts of the Old Testament. In the book of Numbers, the fourth book of the Old Testament, we read that 12 Israeli men were sent to the promised land in advance to investigate the situation there. Two of these people encouraged the Israelites to conquer the promised land, but the other 10 people report that there are the giant men in that land, and the Israelites are unable to weave. He was able to defeat them. Upon hearing this negative report, fear overcomes the people of Israel so that they think of returning to Egypt. Because of this lack of faith, they stay in the desert for 40 years. In the fifth book, Deuteronomy, the people of Bani Israel or Israelites have reached the banks of the Jordan River after 40 years of wandering. The promised land is on the other side of the river. Moses gives a speech to them. When we were on Mount Horeb, the Lord our God said to us, "You have stayed here long enough. Now go and occupy the mountains, land of the Amorites, mountainous land of the Amorites, the regions of the Jordan Valley, the plains and the mountains, the Negev desert, and all the land of Canaan and Lebanon, that is, all the areas from the Mediterranean coast to the Euphrates River. I give it all to you. Go in and take possession of it, because this is the land that I promised to your ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all their future generations. The sixth book is the book of Joshua, in which Joshua becomes the leader of the Israelites nation after Moses, and leads the nation to the promised land. Joshua conquers the cities of Canaan and divides them among the tribes of Israel. Description of one of the stories in the book of Joshua. Joshua sent two spies from Shittim to the other side of the Jordan River to investigate the situation in that land. The two of them went to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and to spend the night there. That night, the king of Jericho was informed that some Israeli spies had entered the city. The king sent people to Rahab's house to hand over the two spies to hand over the two spies. But Rahab, who had hidden the two men, said that they came to me, but I did not understand who they were. When it got dark, they left the city before the gates were closed, and I don't know where they went. But Rahab had already taken the two men to the roof of to the roof and hid them under a pile of flax stalks that she had placed there. So the king's agents were to the banks of the Jordan River in search of these two people. As soon as they left the city gates were closed behind them. At night, before the two men went to sleep, Rahab went to them and on the roof and said to them, I have no doubt that God will give you our land. We are all afraid of you as Israelites. Everyone who hears the name of Israel trembles with fear, because we have heard how when you left Egypt, God made a land way through the Red Sea for you to pass through. We know what you did to Sihon or Og, the kings of the Amorites, who were on the east side of Jordan, and how you destroyed them and their people. When we heard this news, we were afraid and lost our courage, because your God is the God of heaven and earth, and there is no God like him. Now I ask you to answer to me in the name of your God, and give me a sign that when you capture the city of Jericho, the in exchange for the help I gave you, you will protect me along with my parents, brothers, and sisters and their families, so that we will not be killed. In this point, the people of Israel captured the cities of Canaan and settled there. A continuation of the book of the Old Testament is full of wars between their people and other people, including the Palestinians themselves and their other neighbors. One of the notable events in the history of the people of Israel during this period was being exiled to Babylon twice. Of course, in this book, the reason for this exile is related to their idolatry But in any case, they built a temple in Jerusalem during the time of Solomon, which was destroyed after the exile to Babylon, as well as the city of Jerusalem. One of the most colorful promises of the apocalypse in this book is the promise of returning to Jerusalem and rebuilding it. It should be noted that this promise was fulfilled several times. For example, during the time of Cyrus, uh, they were saved from Babylonian captivity and returned to Canaan and rebuilt Jerusalem. So that some of them considered Cyrus to be their apocalyptic promise. That is exactly the events that was supposed to happen in the apocalypse was realized by Cyrus. But the promise, but the problem is that time is infinite, and every date in the future is and even in the past compared to the one after that, and the apocalypse can never be reached. Even the appearance of Jesus Christ um, was not accepted by them as the promise of the end times, and they remained waiting for the next appearance of the Messiah. In the 13th book of the Old Testament, Amos saw a dream about the future of Israel. He says the following about what he saw and heard. God roars like a lion from Mount Zion in Jerusalem, and the green pastures and pastures of Mount Carmel dry up, and the shepherds mourn. Syria. God says the people of Damascus have sinned many times, and I will not forget this, and I will not pass over their guilt. But because just as they beat the threshing floor with iron rods, they also beat my people in Gilad. So I will set fire to King Hazael's palace. I will destroy the strong fortress of Ben Hadad, and I will break the bars that close the gates of Damascus, and I will destroy its people as far as the plain of Aven, and I will destroy the king of Beth Eden. The people of Syria will go into captivity in the city of Kir, Palestine, Palestine. God says that the people of Gaza have committed many sins, and I will not forget this, and I will not pass over their guilt, because they exiled my people and sold them as slaves in Edom. So I will burn the fences of Gaza and destroy all their fortresses. I will kill the people of Ashdod. I will destroy the city of Ekron and the king of Ashkelon. All the remaining Palestinians will perish. In the book of Zechariah, regarding the punishment of the neighboring nations of Israel, it is stated as follows: He will punish Damesh and Hamath, even Tyre and Sidon, despite their skills, will not be spared from punishment, God will throw their fortifications into the sea cut and will burn him to the ground. When Ashkelon sees this event, it will be horrified. Gaza will writhe in the pain, and Ekron will tremble with fear because when you see that Tyre is unable to stop the progress of the enemies, their hope will be destroyed. Gaza will be defeated and its king will be killed, and Ashkelon will be completely destroyed. Ashdod, the rich city of Palestinians, will fall into the hands of the foreigners. The promise of the coming of the King of Israel. Rejoice, O my people, uh, and shout for joy, for you King is coming, for your King is coming to you. He is a victorious Savior and comes humbly, riding on a colt. Uh, I will take away your horses and your chariots, and your bows will be broken. For your king will make peace among all the people. His dominion will be from sea to sea, and from the Euphrates to the farthest part of the earth. Answer to the uh, earth. I'm sorry. Answer to the second question. What happened in the past of these people that such a war of several thousand years happened to them, so that they still could not reach their goal? According to the explanation and the stories presented here from the Old Testament, the beginning of this crisis started with the migration of Jacob or Israel and Joseph and his brothers from Canaan to Egypt. At the time when they were residents of the land of Canaan, they were living in that city like normal citizens, and naturally there was no hostility or territorial claim. They migrated to Egypt. When they returned from Egypt, led by Moses, uh, the sea was split for them, and according to the story of Rahab, the splitting of the sea became a source of pride for the people of Israel and a feeling of fear for the other people around it, which became an excuse, excuse to march and occupy the lands. Of course, it should be noted that 10 of the 12 men who entered the land of Canaan at the time of Moses and claimed that there were giants there were the beginning of the war. Actually, that caused the beginning of the war. So that's even now, some Jews believe that there are giants there. Uh, there has been, but it was assumed that the false report was not given, and the Israelis would have peacefully entered the land they had left. Uh, there would have been no war and no enmity that would continue to this day. Conclusion: this section has not been completed. I wish to complete it and continue it someday. Thank you for your attention.